So I am Sandrine Dixon Decle, and I am the co-president of the Club of Rome. And I represent the Club of Rome and also a series of other organizations, and also work with the European Commission on a series of very important links to the ecological transition. In particular, in the Club of Rome, for the last 50 years, we have been speaking about the fact that we must move away from a growth paradigm, and that we take into consideration the limits to growth on our natural resources, but also on the way in which we as human beings interact with the planet. The Club of Rome, for the last 50 years, has not only published a series of different works, but its esteemed members, all individually, work in a variety of different areas, from the transition into green energy to regenerative agriculture or circular economy. And we all believe that it's fundamental that now, in this decade of action, so before 2030, that we look now at the planetary emergency. The planetary emergency is demonstrating that we have a convergence of tipping points between the health pandemic, the climate crisis, and also the loss of biodiversity. And if you take all three of those, and the fact that we must put in place clear plans of action, not only at the individual level, but clearly through policy, that gives the signal that we have to totally shift away from this growth paradigm, because that is how we got into this mess, into prosperity without growth, into what we call donut economics, which was produced actually by Kate Raworth, one of our members of the Club of Rome, to live within the planetary boundaries, to take into consideration the social and the environmental implications of our relationship with the earth, and to ensure that we decrease our footprint at all steps of the way. Clearly, the ecological transition is necessary, and it comes at a time when we must, as individuals, act within that ecological transition. We have to show our voice, but we also have to show our actions. One of the ways to act is to elect, and clearly that's what I do, those policymakers that actually believe in an ecological transition. We have to use our vote in order to get the right leadership in place. The next is that I personally no longer eat meat. And clearly the impact of meat production, unless it's very locally done and done in an ecological and regenerative way, is very bad for the environment, both in terms of water usage and also greenhouse gases. I have shifted also all of my transport modes, and have very much tried from a very young age to not use a car. So cycling, walking, public transport, scootering, all of these now that are at our fingertips, because we have multimodal systems, in particular in urban areas. Clearly, when in a rural area, that is much more difficult, but still efforts need to be made to bring people in rural areas the possibility to have better individual choices in terms of transport that do not pollute. And I also very much am into the circular economy by purchasing less, so dematerialization, by not actually consuming as much, and trying to also bring my clothes, sell my clothes online, do exchanges, swapping, but also to be okay in terms of owning less. And I think that that is the beauty now, what we see very much in some parts of the next generation, the youth, who do not necessarily believe that ownership models are the most important way of demonstrating that they are well, and that they are healthy, and that they are wealthy. And that is also very important. I think that there are a variety of different inspirations that I've had in my life in terms of the ecological transition. And I must say that one of the earliest ones is, even though I'm French Belgian, I grew up in California. And as a child, already the governor at that time, who was Governor Brown, actually, who was recently governor again in California, declared that it was necessary to not waste water. And Governor Brown's approach in California was to take a bath with a friend, or take a shower with a friend, or ensure that we actually saved water and preserved this very important resource. In addition to that, when I used to shop in California, there were some very clear labels in some of the shops that we went into that demonstrated the impact that each of the different food products had in terms of social impact and environmental impact. So for me, that was an incredible inspiration in terms of how you inform people and also how you shift people's lifestyles. And that clearly had an impact on me. One of the other clear inspirations is Donella Meadows, who was one of the authors of The Limits to Growth. Donella Meadows was not only an incredibly intelligent woman who was able to model the future, and through The Limits to Growth with the other authors, demonstrated the impacts that we would see over the next 50 years and predict the future that we are now living. But also Donella Meadows was very wise and open in her conversations around an intergenerational dialogue and the need to bring more people onto the journey so they understood their role personally within the ecological transition. And clearly, there are others that have inspired me, not necessarily only with regard to the ecological transition, such as Nelson Mandela, but who have very much inspired me, because what we see now within this moment in time as we need to promote this transition is that we need to bring in a sense of humanity. Pope Francis recently indicated in the Laudato Si that we are in the age of the Anthropocene, but we are anthropocentric. And that is the problem today, is that what we are seeing is that this humanity, all of us, have become too centered on what we want as individuals. The ecological transition must be around a collective aim to both respect the environment and Mother Earth, but also respect each other. And if we can move into a eco rather than an ego-centric community spirit, then I think we will be able to really enhance the transition that we need now.